Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Tim's Two Cents, where I basically try to shove my agenda down your throats and force you to think the way I do. No, it's not actually that, but that's the way it probably comes across most of the time, but whatever. I'm Tim Baker, I'm your host. Just a quick thing right here. I normally do a show. You've probably heard of me and heard of this show because you also have heard of You, Me, and BTC. It's a Bitcoin-centric show I do every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, with Daniel Brown and Zach Vole. If you prefer listening to two people having or three people having a discourse, see, that's how smart I am. I can't even figure it out whenever I list three names. But if you prefer having a group discourse, we normally have guests on. We do not normally. We occasionally have guests on. We've been having more of them on, but if you like having more people talk, if you're more interested in Bitcoin, if you're more interested in crypto stuff, check that out again. And again, it's a live show, so if you'd like to chat, you can get us on the chat box, always on YouTube. We do it through Google Hangouts, but again, that's 9 p.m. Eastern every Thursday night. And then also Zach Vole has his own show. It comes out on Tuesdays, whereas this show comes out every Monday. Tuesdays is the Coin Pod with Zach Vole. He interviews people, and again, if you like hearing a discourse between two people, and again, that is more focused on Bitcoin. If you're more interested in that, Bitcoin, crypto, altcoins, all that nice shit. If you're more interested in that, that's definitely something to check out. I normally on this focus on, it's not really philosophy, it's more like looking at philosophy, I guess, looking at different belief systems, different isms, different ways people have tried to set up to live your life or how to view the world. And instead of, so I guess the whole point of this show came out of me wanting to not just take somebody else's worldview and kind of just force that into my life, force that into how I saw the world, but instead try to pick and choose from basically every single belief system there is, because there is something to say for the merit of something that, because it was thought up by another person, there is probably a kernel of truth in that, or at least some kind of an idealistic idea that maybe is useful to hold. And that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm trying to go through different isms and belief systems and figure out what's good about them and what's bad, what's negative, what can't help you and what can. And so far I'm enjoying it. So far I've had a decent amount of interaction with people. Thank you again, Truste, for commenting. Jeremy Bennett comments on pretty much every video. Truste actually, though, had a little bit of a discourse with me, so that was cool, having someone have actual questions about the show. That was nice. So thank you again, and keep those coming. Like, I'll probably say it at the end of this episode, but anytime I do one of these, please either tweet me at bakersdozen93. You'll see my Twitter handle down at the bottom where you're listening to this show or watching it on YouTube. Get me on there, or just comment on the YouTube video, comment to Daniel, comment to whoever. If you like the show, if you didn't like it, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have disagreements, that's perfect. That's great. It's always better to have somebody disagree with you, I think, than to agree with you, because then it does at least further a discourse instead of just saying that it's good. Not to say that I don't like that. I like being patted on the back just as much as anybody else. But a discourse, a disagreement, an argument is always better for, I think, for figuring out your own way of thinking and your own, what you do believe. If you have to argue it and you have to back it up, not necessarily with facts. I'm not as concerned with that. That would be, again, more with like Daniel and the You, Me, and BTC show and Zach's show, where they're dealing with more concrete things. This is less in the realm of facts and more we're just talking about thought, which doesn't really have too many rules. So it's nice to be able to try to work out your thoughts and see if they do make any sense, or if they do kind of cross back on themselves sometimes. And that is, again, the whole point of the show, where I think most hardcore ideologies, where if you are being dogmatic about them, they do eventually cross back over themselves if you, what they say, take it to its natural limit. And that is none more so than the one I'm going to talk about today, which is nihilism. This is probably my favorite ism, as far as it's just it's very simplistic, it seems to me, but not in its application, but in its statement, it's very simplistic. I had some... Now, again, this was probably because words can mean whatever you want them to mean, but especially in my younger... Like years ago, I was sympathetic to this kind of view, sympathetic to the idea that, well, I mean, even if something does mean something, that it's not it is at least not discernible by us. If there is a true meaning to the world, if there is a true definition of morality, it's not something that we as people with our biases and our kind of convoluted thinking can really grasp at or lock down without having those biases or presupposed ideas kind of getting in the way, what we grew up on, what we grew up thinking. All that stuff kind of clouds your mind, and the idea would be that not necessarily that nothing mattered, because I did have a pretty strong Christian upbringing, and I believe that for most of my life so far. I haven't lived that much longer past it, but that if there was a true thing, then people couldn't really grasp at that, and that, I guess, as far as like a Christian would go, the only thing you can really do is give all your cares to God, I guess, to just not to think about them, try to live your life in the most unobtrusive way to other people, try to live as peacefully as you can, but not to worry about it beyond that, because questions like I guess like how government funding is used, or how whatever, we're not going to be able to figure out how it can be morally used. We're not going to be able to figure out how we can best talk to other people beyond just not talking to them. And that's what I spent a lot of my teenage years doing, was just not talking, which is kind of weird now because this is basically all I do. I have a manual labor job, but besides that, if I'm doing something online, if I'm doing anything with my friends, I'm the one who's talking the most, because I found that I prefer that. But whatever, it doesn't really matter that much. We'll get into what actual nihilism, and I'll go off of the definitions I've found online. Nihilism is the philosophical position which argues that being, especially past and current human existence, is without objective meaning, purpose, comprehensible truth, or essential value. It asserts that there is no reasonable proof of the existence of a higher ruler or creator, that true morality does not exist, and that objective secular ethics are impossible. Therefore, life has, in a sense, no truth. No action is objectively preferable to any other. Now, right there in that definition, I don't like already it says, therefore life has, in a sense, no truth, and that isn't how I see if you take nihilism all the way. It's not in a sense. Then if you do believe and you do call yourself a nihilist, and I think there's a lot of shows, there's a lot of new TV shows, if they're geared towards millennials, if they're geared towards younger people, they have that kind of undertone of nothing matters. I remember something from, I think it was the first season of Rick and Morty, whenever I still watched that, where, what is it? One of the characters is talking, the other one says something like, nothing matters, nobody's meant to be anywhere, so let's watch TV, which is very, not preferable, which is very, it's a, God damn it, I can't, this is why words shouldn't matter, because I don't know how to express myself right now, because I can't remember a dictionary word. It's very convenient, there you go, it's very convenient for a TV show to explain to you that, hey, you don't have to worry about this, you shouldn't be working out at the gym, you shouldn't be writing something, you shouldn't be having a conversation with somebody, you shouldn't be developing a relationship with people. You might as well just watch TV and not worry about it, because nothing matters, man. But that is, I think, that is why I do like the simplicity of nihilism, the just, hey, none of it fucking matters because we can't tell that it does. There isn't most of the time with people, morality is based off of culture and people around them, and there isn't a consistent morality that we really stick to. It even inside religions, if you go over 50 years, everything changes because the people change, and then the religions kind of change to appease those people. I don't think it's the other way around. Like, I don't think that the reason why Christians aren't, or even Jews aren't stoning gay people or stoning people who have had sex outside of marriage, I don't think that they've stopped doing that because the rulers or whatever the religious people have decided that it's more economical for them to keep those people around to get tithes or something like that. I think it's the culture has moved away from allowing that kind of violence, especially outside of a court system, especially outside of the government system. They've kind of given that monopoly on violence completely over to the government. So that might be part of it, but it's just as a people, especially in the West, we've become more not even against violence, because again, we're fine with watching it, we're fine with the government doing it, but we don't personally like it. Our kind of threshold for what we're willing to do to another person is, I think, across the board down. There's less violence, there's less murder, there's less all these things. And that has more to do with, I think, just people changing. But back to my point, that does kind of lend itself to the belief in the idea that there was no actual concrete moral ethics. There was nothing that we could just say where it was from, because even if you can argue with the most hardcore Christian alive today, they're not going to be advocating for the murder of gay people or people who have sex before marriage. Even the Westboro Baptist Church never went out and personally did that. They just walked around with signs and said that God hates fags, or soldiers have died for a country that's evil, so we shouldn't celebrate them, stuff like that. But they were never actually doing the thing that the Bible calls for them to do. So, I mean, if you actually believe these things, you think that, and if you actually believe these things and you are that hard line that you're going to go out and just protest people and wave these signs in front of their face, why aren't you just doing it? And the answer is, one, they don't want to go to prison, and two, because we've had that taken out of us. We've lost the conviction, I guess, as a nation or as just people in general, the conviction that makes you believe something so wholeheartedly that you're willing to kill another person for, which I'm all for. I think this goes back to the whole God is dead. I think that was, I don't know when exactly that was. I think in the 40s or 50s. I don't know whenever that phrase started to be more used, but let's see. But a lot of this nihilistic stuff, because I'll talk about this while I'm trying to figure out the God is dead thing. A lot of the nihilistic stuff comes from Nietzsche. It's mostly associated with him, but it's also associated with a lot of the literature that came out after World War One. After something like total war, it is hard for, whether or not you were a soldier or not, it's hard for you to come back after seeing your city bombed, your family murdered. You either go one of two ways, where you either go full-on extremist, like what you see with how the U.S. is basically just creating terrorists in the Middle East by just blowing up weddings and children and all these, and you go, and then those people go, all right, fuck it, I'm gonna join ISIS, I'm gonna join something, I'm gonna go full-on extremist Islam, and let's attack these people. Or in the sense of what most of the countries and most of the writers talked about after World War One, the people who were involved in that and lived around that time, is you go, like, this war was for nothing. This war was over a bunch of treaties that we made up, and then we just blew the world apart for really nothing more than a dick measuring contest. A lot of people miss whenever they talk about World War One, and this doesn't really have to do with nihilism, but this shit didn't happen before central banks got involved, and they just were able to, people were able to just borrow however much and just tax their own people, and to inflate the money currency to the point where, so that they could sell all these things, they could buy all this shit for the war effort. They used to have to borrow it from another country, and if you're fighting half the world, and the other half of the world is also fighting that other half of the world, there isn't as much money to go around unless you start having a currency that isn't based on anything. So I guess that would be like economic nihilism, I guess. The central banks is economic nihilism, that none of it really matters, none of it has a concrete, there's no true economic morality, so who the fuck cares? I've never heard anybody argue that, but maybe they have. Nihilism is the product of a world where we don't have anything to be really worried about anymore. It's much easier and much more useful to believe in a God whenever you are close to dying every single day. Whenever you have, like, if you get diarrhea, you might die from just not having enough water. You could die from the common cold. You could die from famine. You could die from someone coming in and just taking your stuff because they kind of wandered through the area. It's much more useful and much more you're much more dependent on something from keeping you, or something to keep you going and keep you suffering every single day. And then in this day and age, this world we're in now, there isn't as much suffering. I mean, not to say there isn't suffering in the world, but like in the developed world, the amount of suffering and the standard of living has gone, basically skyrocketed. Like, you think Bitcoin has skyrocketed in price in the past couple years. The standard of living is something so beyond what someone 100 years ago could even grasp at, that I think we're kind of just stuck. We're just stuck in this point where we go, well, I mean, I don't have to worry about food. I don't have to worry about someone coming into my house and just killing my whole family because they don't like how I look. I mean, that stuff happens, but again, statistically, not in the same amounts, the same numbers that it used to the point where it's useless to really worry about something like that. But we do still try to find stuff to worry about, and you have people in the past 40 years, mental health cases have some number like quadrupled or something, maybe even more than that, as we kind of just develop new things to be worried about. But besides that, I think nihilism comes where you go, we have this modern world, and I know that what I just said kind of goes against how a lot of the writers in World War One or after World War One developed this, but they were on the come up of the world developing like this. They were on the come up as standard of living was rising very rapidly, especially in those times. But nowadays, we have all those writers. Everybody reads those. Those are things that I read even in a Christian high school. We had books like The Heart of Darkness and All Quiet on the Western Front and things like that, where it's like the famous thing from Heart of Darkness, and then also from the movie adaptation Apocalypse Now, is the main character Kurtz saying the horror, just talking about human suffering and human kind of interaction. It's just this meaningless cesspool of violence and hatred towards one another, and there's no point to it, where maybe a couple hundred years ago there was more hatred, there was more murder, but most people had an idea that, hey, God is, at least if not in control, he's there. There is a concern of his for us. He does care what we do. He does punish those who deserve to be punished. He does reward those who deserve to be rewarded. And that is a reason in of itself to follow a certain moral code. And I was saying I was looking up where God is dead. The origin is from Nietzsche in, I guess, I don't know whenever it started becoming widely used as people. I feel like it was there's a 1966 April 8th edition of Time, and it concerned American theology in the 1960s, known as the Death of God. I think that's what I was thinking of. And it basically the idea that, like, as a culture, there's an unbelief in God, even amongst people who profess to believe in Him. There's a separation and a distance that they have in their lives from the actual belief in God and the actual way that they apply that to their life. Like, the average Christian doesn't live that much different than the average person in America. They still watch the same television shows. They drink the same beer. They drink the same alcohol. There's a decent amount of them smoke weed. They take part in all the things of culture and don't see that as a problem, because there is a lessening and a softening of what God is and what God will or will not tolerate. It's much more about Jesus is kind of like this hippie character where he just forgives everything, and it's all about love, and that's very different, at least from what I've read and the tracts that I used to read from people like Wesley. I don't remember his first name. I'll have to look that up too, but it was a theologian. I think his last name was Wesley. John Wesley. He was an English cleric and theologian, and there's just a much more hardcore hatred of the human, hatred of the self than what you see in most modern Christians. Even the ones who bemoan how evil they are still don't have, they're not sitting in a closet for hours crying and praying. They're not like actually putting out that much suffering for their God. So that's what I'm talking about. There's kind of like this just overall general taking part in nihilism, that the stuff doesn't really matter, even for Christians, because then you can kind of, well, as long as I pray, as long as I go to church, as long as I make sure I'm good with God, whatever that means, then I'll be fine whenever I die. And then that's not even including the people that decide to, well, I'll join God later, because Christians nowadays love to bring that up. They love to use that as a way to try to convert people and go, see, like, we know you're a good person and you want to think you're good, but maybe you even think that you'll get right with God when you're older. But I've never found that to be very genuine, because again, there is no fear of God in any modern religion besides like super hardcore sex. There's no fear of God's wrath because, well, you have the Steelers are playing on Sunday, and then the Penguins are, I'm using Pittsburgh sports teams, but even over in the football game's on, and then you have Parks and Recreation to watch, and then, Breaking Bad was great last night, wasn't it? And blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I talked enough about this, I think. I want to talk about what's good about nihilism, and I think there's something good and beneficial for a person, especially if you are taking on a task. You can kind of trick yourself into not having the anxiety that comes with if you really want to do something. Say if you really want to be a writer, or you want to make podcasts, or you want to be a musician, or you want to be a painter, there's something that you can do where this might not necessarily be nihilism, but I've found that in my head it almost comes across as that, where you just go, well, it doesn't matter. In my life, there was no right path for me to take. There was no, instead of becoming an artist, that now I should have gone to law school and decided to live my life like that, and then I could have supported myself. There is no right path. There is no moral path. There is only however you decide, because everybody else is just as confused as you are and just as baseless as you are. So you can't let other people's expectations run your life. You can't let other people's expectations decide and dictate how you're going to live your life and how you're going to decide what is most important for you. There's, I think, also benefit in just giving some of the world up, giving some of your cares up a little bit, getting over the anxiety. Again, this has to do, I used to have a real problem with anxiety, especially in social situations. But again, if you think of this as, hey, you're going to be dead someday and you're not going to get a chance at this again. You're not going to be able to do any of this stuff again. And in the end, it doesn't really matter if you accidentally hurt somebody's feelings or make them not like you or do any of these things. There is something beneficial in thinking, hey, it doesn't matter. Fuck it. We're just going to see how this goes. We're not going to concern ourselves with if this is the right thing to do, or if it's not, we're just going to live. I mean, I guess that could be broken down into YOLO, which is a little bit more douchey term for it, I guess. But that's mostly where I see the benefits of like a nihilistic approach to your life. We're going to run this ad, and then right after I'm going to talk about the non-beneficial, the ways that nihilism can kind of hurt your life, especially if you let yourself get too deep into it. But here, I'll be right back.
Hey guys, today's show is brought to you by Chronologic.network. Chronologic is an Ethereum-based project that aims to solve time-related problems on the blockchain. Through Chronologic's 3 core products, the Ethereum alarm clock, debt smart contracts, and the day token minting mechanism, they solve the problems of payment scheduling, crypto loan time constraints, and unstable token launches. Find out more at Chronologic.network.
Alright guys, hope you liked the episode. I'm making a little bit of noise, sorry about that, but hope you liked it, or not the episode, I'm sorry, hope you guys liked the ad. You got to hear Daniel's voice. Again, I do a podcast with him, so if you want to hear more of that beautiful voice, tune in with us at 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday nights every week, and you can get a live show with him, me, and Zach Vole. He wasn't on last week, it was just me and Zach, but he's normally on with us. When I said before the ad break, I said I was going to now talk about the negatives of letting yourself kind of get involved, letting your mind go down the path of nihilism, because anything you start to believe, anything you try to convince yourself of, I think we have to be a little bit more understanding of how much your ideas and your beliefs do affect you and how much they can change you depending on how gullible you are. I found that I am very gullible, especially when it comes to what I take in, the kind of ideas that I read about, the kind of arguments that I read, and I seem to be very easy to kind of trick myself into believing something if it kind of suits me at that moment. I don't think that I'm alone in that. That, again, it seems like that's what everybody is. It seems like, because even with, like I was mentioning before, the kind of the TV shows and this kind of popular, I would call it millennialist culture of just nothing matters and it doesn't, we shouldn't have to worry about these things, and your morality is outdated Christian bullshit, and nothing is really important, and God doesn't exist. But no, wait, don't call someone that word, and don't murder somebody, and don't steal from me, and don't use the incorrect phrasing here, and don't do whatever. Like, people pick and choose where they want to apply something, even with nihilism. And this is what we're talking about, is when it can be beneficial, and I talked about that before. But where it can be negative is that, I mean, if you're going to take nihilism to its final conclusion, to its end conclusion, you do have to say and agree with the definition that any kind of morality is baseless. Any kind of morality has no claim over you. It has no claim over your life. It has no claim over anything. Murder is not inherently wrong, but it's not inherently good either. And it's just it's up to, I guess, whatever what facilitates your pleasure. That gets into like utilitarianism, but I think the nihilism will help push someone in that way, because you can, if you're going to believe this, you also have to believe that it doesn't matter. And if I decide that I do want to kill somebody, then it isn't a moral thing. Not like I'm not saying that outside of a religion you can't have a basis in ethics, but most people who, especially people who complain about Christianity or any religion, will make that claim, will make the argument that Christian morality is bullshit and it has no basis, but then they don't really have any basis for why they have certain ethics besides just that's just wrong. And again, it's a culture thing. It's how you were raised. It has nothing to do with if you've looked at how it works, where you could say that's at least utilitarian, where the ethics are defined by what helps to further human society, and then you can have the argument if it's utilitarian for the individual or for the group or for whatever. But most people don't have that. Most people just go, oh, nothing matters, it's bullshit. But I have this kind of rudimentary idea that murder is wrong just because, and you have no argument then. Not that arguing if murder is a sin or an evil thing is really that common of a conversation I think you're going to have with most people. I certainly haven't ever tried to have that conversation, because if you do that to somebody just that you've met in public or something like that, most people are going to kind of look at you weird and be like, dude, why are you like trying to convince me that murder isn't bad? Are you going to murder me? Or are you going to try to do a strangers on a train thing with me and get me to murder my mother? What exactly is going on right now? But I think nihilism does lend itself to that, to the idea of just nothing. And I guess that's probably where the word comes from. Just nothing. Let me look that up too. But another way where you can get stuck in having issues with nihilists and how, just nothing matters, is you do lose that ability to motivate and drive yourself by having something bigger than yourself. Nihilism leads itself to, like, there's not really anything important outside of my own needs or wants, and you lose that ability that maybe someone with a religious background, or even somebody with just any kind of passion, you kind of lose that basis for that passion. You have to admit to yourself that this passion is, like everything else that you're complaining about, meaningless and essentially pointless, and that isn't really conducive for hard work. That's not conducive for dedicating yourself to something. That isn't conducive for, it's just not conducive for living a life that is consistent in any way, because you can say for like a day, hey, I'm going to stick to this diet or this regimen of practice, and then the next day you go, I don't want to do that, and it has no point, and it doesn't matter, so I'm not going to continue doing that. Again, this all comes down to, I guess, having discipline, having the discipline to look at something and, like nihilism, and say, hey, I can maybe take some stuff from this. I can maybe go, maybe I shouldn't take things so seriously. Maybe I shouldn't take even my beliefs so seriously, because maybe I'm not able to discern what is true necessarily, and be a little bit more relaxed on that. But then also you need to relax on it whenever you're applying it to other people. if you do have a set of morality or ethics, you need to have the discipline to apply it to yourself consistently, or else consistency is what keeps you in check. Consistency is what keeps you from just going, oh, well, I'm not going to do it, because you go, well, I'm going to break everything I've done for the past years just because I don't feel like doing this, just because I feel like being lazy. And that's something very easy to fall into with nihilism. Well, let's just fucking drink, smoke, and just kind of numb ourselves to anything because it all doesn't matter. Just take some Xanax and let's just kind of work out our lives until we die, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I never write the novel I want to. It doesn't matter if I never if I never record that song. It doesn't matter if I never make that art piece, because none of it matters. If I did make those things, it wouldn't matter anyway. So the negative of it is nothing. The negative of nihilism is that nothing does matter. The positive of it is nothing matters. It's how you take that context and how you apply it to whatever situation you're in. And that's where context comes in, where you go, well, is this something that I will benefit from telling myself it doesn't matter? Or is this something where if I tell myself it doesn't matter, it's going to lead to, down the line, bad things for me, slipping into bad habits, or just kind of laziness and despair from not having a purpose? I can't really say too much more about it, besides if I actually did some research about it, maybe I could, but that's not the point of this, especially with nihilism. I feel I do a disservice to all these philosophers who did espouse nihilism by actually putting in the work and effort to do it, because it's pointless. And if anything I can get from this, it's that nihilistic philosophers are kind of crybabies. You want to argue, and you're kind of basing all of your ideas off of that nothing matters, but then also you should read all these different pages I've written about how nothing matters and all this, and it's just very, I don't know. Maybe I'm just saying that because I'd prefer everybody listen to me. That's what you should do, is you should throw out all your Nietzsche books. You should throw out all of your books from the Russian philosophers who talked about all this. You should get rid of all that and just listen to this podcast, and that will serve you just as well. But I don't know. Maybe not. God is dead. Maybe not. Nothing matters. Maybe not. But thanks again for listening. Tell me if you think nothing matters. Tell me if you think I don't matter. Tell me if you think this podcast shouldn't matter. Tell me if you liked it. Tell me if you got anything from it. Tell me if you have any experiences in solving problems in your life by applying that. If applying that nothing matters and that you shouldn't worry about it. And tell me if that has ever helped you with anxiety. I'd like to see if it has helped with other people, because it really has with me. I can't really think of what other reason I would have had to change from what I was. It wasn't really a maturity issue, I don't think. There's a few other things it could have been, but I do see it more as just trying to convince myself that nothing does matter. It's not that important. But yeah, again, let me know, because as much as I'm going to say in this episode that nothing matters, it does matter. I think most of the time the people who say that they don't care and who act like they don't care generally, or not generally, they normally do care a lot. It's something of a defense mechanism against trying to care too much. But I do care, I guess. I want to hear what you guys think, so comment down below. Again, we have a show on every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Get us there, where you can live chat with us. You don't have to make comments after listening to the episode. You can interrupt us right in the middle and tell us we're stupid or wrong or anything like that. And Zach will have his show out tomorrow on Tuesday, the Coin Pod. I don't know who he's interviewing, but he'll be interviewing another guy involved in crypto. But look forward to that. Check that out. Thanks for listening again. This has been the Tim's 2 Cents, episode 6, Nihilism. I'm going to try to think of some catchy title. And bye, guys. Have fun. Nothing matters. Love you. Maybe not. I don't know.